Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar with DAL Piper about their birth certificate clinic. My name's Kate Scanlon. I'm one of the capacity building coordinators with Community Legal Centres Queensland. I'd like to first acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're holding today's webinar in Meanjin and Brisbane. They are the Turrbal and Yagara people. I pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and I'd like to acknowledge that these are stolen lands and that sovereignty was never ceded. As this webinar is being viewed by people across Queensland and Australia, I pay respects to traditional owners throughout the country and extend a warm welcome to any First Nations people joining us today. Today, we're pleased to welcome Riley Arthur from DLA Piper, who'll be talking to us about the work they do obtaining birth certificates and making them more accessible for people who are vulnerable and where there might be complex circumstances. I'll let Riley tell you a little bit more about themselves in a moment. But before I do that, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you attend some of our webinars regularly, you might notice that we're using a different platform and we're using Teams. It might be a bit clunky today. We're testing out something new, so please be patient with us if there are any issues. There will be a recording of the webinar that will be available for download tomorrow, and we'll be sending that out in an email and popping that up on our website. We also encourage you to ask questions. So there is a Q&A box at the top of your Teams in the top panel. So please pop your questions in there and we'll hold them until the end of the presentation. Compared to other presentations we do and other webinars, this one will be a little bit more interactive. So we encourage you to ask any questions that you have. But for now, I'll hand over to Riley. Thanks, Riley.
Thanks, Kate, and thanks everyone for coming along. I'd also like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people and their elders, past, present, and emerging, and also reiterate Kate's point, sovereignty was never ceded. So thanks for joining us today. What I'm going to do is just run through the clinic that DLA Piper provides and then open the floor to questions. Hoping this can be really interactive, so feel free to turn your camera on if you can, but let me know throughout if you need any guidance, and I can answer questions at the end. So DLA Piper is an international law firm which has an internal pro bono team, which I'm a part of. I'm based here in Brisbane, but our team is spread off all around Australia. So we have people in Sydney and Melbourne as well. The DLA Piper Birth Certificate Clinic started in 2017, so it has been running for some time now. And essentially the reason behind the clinic was that we saw a need to take this burden off plates of CLCs and support workers. It's an administrative process. It really takes quite a lot of time, and it's something that that we can be quite helpful at. So a birth certificate, as I'm sure you're all aware, is sort of the key document to unlocking rights and privilege in society. And there's just so much that it bars people without the birth certificate. So that's your primary identification. And 9 times out of 10, that is sort of the thing that you need to get any other identification. So this is something that we see necessary for enrolling in daycare, enrolling in schooling, getting a job, getting a tax file number, getting a passport is the biggest one we see, driver's license, bank account, all the rest of it. So we do acknowledge that birth registration is the responsibility of parents, but and 96% of births will be registered at birth, but of those 4% unregistered births, the majority are from very vulnerable populations and First Nations communities. So this lack of birth registration really does prevent already vulnerable people and minorities and First Nations communities from accessing so many other support services available, and just sees the sort of culmination of effects. So this is where we are trying to assist. We can assist with registering births, applying for replacement certificates, applying for amendments, applying to add a parent. We've also started to dabble in some death certificates as well. We've seen a real need for death certificates, particularly for people who they're dealing with a death that might be suspicious circumstances, still before a coroner. They can't get a death certificate. They can't tie up necessary things, things like that. We're happy to take those referrals as well. And the sort of circumstances that we'll take referrals from, we pretty much won't say no. So anything from domestic violence victims who've fled a situation, left all of their identification behind. That's where we'll be able to provide a birth. We'll be able to talk with the registry and provide a birth certificate. First Nations people, people living in rural or remote areas, homelessness. We've started to work with some health justice partnerships, sort of a real varied group of people who can receive this support. And of course, I will just note that all of our support is pro bono, and thus far we've never, even for outlays and disbursements, we've never charged anything, particularly for those ones that escalate to the district court. We've been happy to support the filing fees necessary. And speaking of that sort of district court angle, we've had a couple of cases here in Queensland where we've had clients in their 50s, have never had their birth registered, come from very vulnerable backgrounds, never been able to access a birth certificate, therefore never been able to get a passport, never been able to leave the country, very sort of have tried to make do by keeping their driver's license active and just never letting that lapse as long as they can. Of course, they got their driver's licenses before you needed 100 points of ID. And so things would look very different now, but they sort of say they were lucky to get their licenses when they did. And in those cases, two separate cases, about 6 months apart, we worked with a barrister pro bono and managed to get a court order, and the registry was more than happy to provide that based on the court order, provide that registration and birth certificate. And that was a really, really quite a big deal for those clients who were able to, in one case, access her superannuation because she was able to retire early and was unable to access her superannuation without her birth certificate. So that was like a life-changing moment for her. And on that sort of relationship with BDMR, we have really good relationships with the BDMR or the registries in almost every state and territory now. We have people that we can just directly contact. And so when it comes to those really complex cases that may take, be really time consuming, be a real administrative burden, it's just emails back and forth with sort of the people in the registry, we can go straight to either the Registrar General or sort of the head of whichever department in the relevant state or territory. And it really just speeds up that process. Usually it's a head of community engagement or a head of legal. And it just makes it so much more seamless for us because where we have those really complex cases, we're able to go straight through. And that means it's like what would otherwise be a very time consuming and administrative heavy process. We're just able to make that a little bit easier for everyone. So this is a busy clinic, but our commercial lawyers at DLA Piper really love this work and they're really passionate about this work. And there's lawyers that are constantly asking us for more. I think we have about 25 cases presently currently on the go, but they do wrap up quite quickly. Those easier ones like a birth registration, that can be, you can sort of wrap that up in a matter of weeks. Sometimes the ones that, proceed to court, that you're sort of looking at 6 months or longer. So we try not to give a timeline, but between like a couple of weeks and sort of 6 to 12 months it can take. So we have lawyers, our commercial lawyers who assist us with this, constantly working on these matters. But we are pushing this clinic a little bit more. We'd love to get the word out because we see the value in it and we have capacity to do more, and it's something that we can do and take that sort of time-consuming administrative burden out of the community sector if they need the support. So we're really keen to assist and sort of see the value in this clinic. So I feel like that's enough for me. I think there's some questions that I've received before when registration commenced. So unless there's any questions right now, happy to proceed to those, Kate.
Yeah, that sounds great. So just a reminder, if you have a question about the process, if you have a question around birth certificates generally, You can either pop your question up in the Q&A box, or if you would prefer to chat, you don't feel like typing, pop your hand up and I'll unmute you. And that'll give you another opportunity to talk if you just don't feel like typing. But any questions you have around how to access, how to refer clients, how this works, anything about birth certificates, please pop it in the question box or pop your hand up. But otherwise, Riley, maybe we'll go to the questions we first got from registrations.
So there was one about pretty much how to get in contact. At the end of this seminar, Kate will circulate our referral form. So that sets out step by step how to contact us, essentially. It'll just provide my email and the senior associate in my team, Laura, her email as well. Feel free to get in contact with one or both of us. And within the referral form is a list of just details that we're going to need from the client. So name, date of birth, whether they're seeking a registration, whether they're seeking a replacement certificate, just the most basic things. And if you provide that to us, we can get started from there. Usually the way that it works is the CLC will let the client know that to expect a call from us. And then if that is appropriate, depending on the circumstances, we'll give the client a call, set them out through the process. We then enter into an engagement with that client. So just for the scope of obtaining the birth certificate, whatever form that may be, we enter into engagement with them. We'll correspond with them directly throughout that process. And then, throughout the process, if we need to bring the CLC back in for whatever it might be, sometimes it's just for the client to come into the office so that they can sign a form, some of the day-to-day stuff. That's sort of the engagement. And we don't need to, there's not a lot of using the CLC as a medium point all the time. We also, I should say, we will take referrals for any state and territory in Australia. We haven't done too much overseas work. There's been 1, 2 or 3 that we've had in New Zealand, but that's because we have an office in New Zealand. So that's where someone in Australia is seeking their birth certificate because they were born in New Zealand, but the client themselves is in Australia. We have an office in New Zealand. We have a few offices in New Zealand. We also have offices in the UK. So we've been able to use those offices to help with some of the overseas work. But if we don't have an office in that country, we're unlikely to be able to assist with an overseas birth certificate, unfortunately. But it is something we would love to get into. But it's just that we can't really assist with those ones where we don't have an office. And I understand that's probably something that would be really important that unfortunately we can't help with. There's a couple of questions also about people under 18 and they don't have parents to assist. We can definitely help with those, and we have in the past. It's just a matter of assessing with the CLC what sort of ID they have so far, whether they have any ID at all. And it's usually it's been very much case by case. So happy to assess with those. If you've got some more specific examples, happy to speak to those. But generally we have assisted in the past and can. And when it comes to sort of other vulnerable groups, culturally and linguistically diverse groups, we've definitely done a lot of work in that space, and can, if a translator via phone is necessary, we can absolutely facilitate that and able to sort of work with those communities as well. So that's not a problem. Those are the questions that covers off the questions from registration. So
great, thanks, Riley. So we've had a couple of other questions pop in. So we have one which is asking, is the process entirely pro bono, so the whole process, or does there need to be changes or charges if someone goes to court or it becomes a much longer case?
Yeah, entirely pro bono. Where we've taken matters to court, we've dealt with the filing fees, and to be entirely honest, 9 times out of 10, our clients are low income, able to qualify for filing fee reductions anyway. So it's never a significant cost where it is. So that's definitely not something to worry about. And we're always 100% pro bono with this work.
Great, thank you. So you have addressed this a little bit. We have another question, which is how do we refer? I know you mentioned that I'll be emailing out the referral form. Um, is there any other details people need to know about the process to refer?
No, just send us an email. If you're more comfortable, give me a call. Happy to discuss. Um, if it's a particularly complex case, definitely happy to discuss. So yeah, our email and details and stuff will be in that form.
Fantastic. And so another question we have is there a means test for your service? And I guess what I'd add to that is there any particular criteria that you guys are looking for certain clients for the target group that you're looking to support compared to not? Are there some people who'll be in and out within that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Whilst it's not means tested, we expect that the referrer, this is a client of the referrer, and that the referrer, the CLC, has already done their means testing for this client and done their and like assessed that the client is eligible for their services. So that's the that's the expectation from us. The anticipation from us is that the person is eligible for the service. That said, we're happy to sort of assist whoever comes through the door with this clinic. And we've not had to turn anyone away because of eligibility at this point. So, yeah, that I don't see eligibility being an issue, and we definitely don't we won't pick anyone or any one group over another. This did originally start the clinic did originally start with a focus on First Nations communities because that was where the need was at the time. It's sort of evolved into both a First Nations focus, but also at the moment a real like homelessness and mental illness focus, and that's where we're seeing quite a lot of our referrals come through. People who have had to leave home for whatever reason and don't have their identification anymore. So I think we've now kind of evolved with whatever the referrals are.
Great, thank you. So if you have other questions, please pop them in the Q&A box at the top. I guess another question, so I guess just clarifying there, it sounds like if someone is eligible for a service from a community legal centre, they're therefore likely to be eligible for your service. I know we've had a few people register who are not necessarily from a community legal centre, but they are from an NGO broadly. Do you take referrals from NGOs as well as just community legal centres, or are you looking more for people who are already accessing some type of legal support?
Great question. We'll take referrals from CLCs, NGOs, the sort of support work. We take a lot of referrals at the moment from Wesley Mission as well. Any sort of health justice partnership. We've taken referrals from a couple of hospitals in the past. Not limited to the organisations we take referrals from, provided they're eligible for your services. We're going to assume they're eligible for ours. We won't sort of run like an income check, I guess.
Great, thank you. So we've got another question from Ben, which is, for the referral, do we provide any supporting documentation or just the client's name and contact details? What information was helpful for us to provide with the referral?
That's really great. A really great question. The referral form sets out quite a large table of details. I can just have a look, and it's name, place of birth, date of birth, address, phone number, parents' names, parents' addresses, if they have other identification, Medicare card, Centrelink card, driver's license. What else have we taken in the past? In some cases where there's none of those things, we'll take TFN, most recent paid power bill, like things that just prove that someone is existing, where they don't have like Medicare, Centrelink, other cards. So pretty much at first referral, if you have all of those documents, that is brilliant. And if you can send those to us, that's super, super helpful. Otherwise, we're happy to liaise with the client to get those documents. But the referral form does set out in quite some detail the information that we need if you have it. And of course, that's always the caveat, is sometimes that's just not available. And we totally understand that. And we'll work around what's available and what we can get from the client throughout the process.
Great, thanks, Riley. And I guess I was just wondering if for some reason a client was referred, but there's a conflict and you guys are unable to assist, do you have any other organizations that you work with or any other law firms who might be able to then take on like individual one-off cases that you then refer conflicts to?
Definitely. Because we so rarely work with individuals, we don't see conflicts that much. In terms of the firm itself, we in pro bono, we work with individuals every day, but the firm itself, we don't see conflicts too much. But we do have a really supportive network of other pro bono firms throughout not just Brisbane, but Australia. And we have referred individuals, not for birth certificate matters. We haven't been conflicted yet, but we have referred individuals where we just don't have capacity or we have a conflict to assist. And other firms are really supportive of this work and really supportive of the clinic itself. So I wouldn't anticipate that we wouldn't be able to place a matter with someone else if we couldn't take it ourselves. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And is there any absolute minimum amount of details you need from a client? I'm expecting that in some circumstances there might be clients who don't actually know all the details even of exactly where they were born.
Mm.
Is there a minimum where then you can't help if you don't have certain details?
We've had one client who she wasn't exactly sure where she was born. She knew that she was told somewhere along the line that she may have been born in Queensland. But she'd gone through about 20 years of applying to every BDM in Australia and constantly being told she wasn't registered. And she'd never known her parents. She sort of went through an informal adoption situation, and had no information about her birth whatsoever, just sort of what she thought she was told as a child. That one ended up proceeding to the district court and we got a court order. So we're able to make do. It is just a much longer process. That one ended up taking about 6 or 8 months. About 6 months. But we are able to definitely make do where there's no information. It's just a matter of putting together an affidavit, finding some supportive letters of people that have known this person for as long as they can, 20 odd years usually, proving that they've, been to school, had a school report at some stage. It was really just whatever we could find, even if it wasn't official ID. So we definitely, we've never had one that we haven't been able to assist yet in this clinic. And we make a real effort with these complex cases. And so when it comes to who's managing these particular cases, some of the more straightforward birth registration, there's other forms of ID that can support the registration, or there's other forms of ID that can get your replacement certificate, for example. Those are handled by some of our commercial volunteer lawyers because it's something that they can do really easily. Just a matter of filling out a form. Whereas the more complex ones, the ones that are, proceeding to court, the ones that are requiring quite a lot of correspondence with the registry or the sort of the registrar general themselves, that's where our team, so myself, Senior Associate Laura Elliott, and our partner Kate Martin, that's where our team will handle those ones because we have a little bit more experience and have done quite a few more of these matters. So there's not been a matter that we haven't been able to assist yet.
Fantastic. And so we have a question it's gone into the chat box. It's a little bit longer. Let me just catch up. So we have a question from a paralegal who works in remote WA, and they work in a Indigenous women's program in remote towns and communities. And they've asking if there's a direct office person they can refer to in WA, as ID is one of the biggest issues that they come across while doing outreach.
Yeah, so you'd still contact us because we oversee all of Australia's birth certificate clinic. And then if we weren't able to get someone in the Perth office, for example, to assist us, we would take that on. And being interstate is not a bother. I've done matters in WA, I've done matters in South Australia. Most recently I did one in South Australia. So definitely just give us a call, and we're happy to help with that process.
Great. So we've got two more questions. One is just more not necessarily about having the process, I think, done by DLA. I think it's more about, do you know anywhere that we can access funds to help clients pay the cost of obtaining a birth certificate? Some of our clients are struggling to pay these costs. So
Yeah.
I think it's more about external funding rather than actually your program doing it. That's how I'm interpreting the
Yeah.
question.
So when it comes to the cost of certificates, almost all of the registries in Australia have a fee waiver program. So part of our process is that all of our applications will be accompanied by a fee waiver letter. And usually we're at the point with the registries that they will just waive the fees, and there's never any back and forth about it, because they understand that our program is entirely pro bono and that we're taking on clients who are vulnerable, low income, cannot afford to pay fees like this. Some of the fees for a placement certificate are like nearly $100. So that is like a very substantial amount. There's no program, to my knowledge at least, that funds this, facilitates people to just pay the $100 and get the certificate. We can, however, draft a fee waiver letter, which is something that our lawyers are really good at these days, and can just waive the fees. And the registries are really, really responsive to these because they have these policies for a reason. And they're all like very, very good about just, yeah, you've ticked the box of, you're a low income household, no problems. And sometimes even where the fee waiver policy may not fit your client's circumstances or other client's circumstances, it's just a matter of having a conversation with the registry, and they're more than happy to sort of let that one slide. So we've not come up against a registry yet that's pushed back on a fee waiver application.
Fantastic. So we have three more questions so far. One of them I think you did answer earlier, which was, have you ever had an application refused? And I think you're saying that for all the birth certificates you guys have tried to get so far, you've been able to get them all. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. The next question is, for clients born overseas and are now Australian citizens, do you assist with applying for replacement Australian citizenship certificates? For example, a certificate would be required to obtain a driver's license. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we haven't in the past, with applying for replacement citizenship certificates. We haven't done that yet, but it's not something that we'd say no to. We would have to, assess what's going on in terms of conflicts and everything with the department, but happy to take that one on notice. And if you want to send me an email, and I can come back to you about whether we could help with citizenship certificates.
Great, thank you. So another question we have is in two parts. So the
Mhm.
first part is, do you do this work for PNG birth certificates? Because I know you mentioned there's a couple of other countries that you guys have worked in. And do you use interpreters, and would you cover the cost of interpreters? Because as we know, interpreters can be expensive.
Yeah. We haven't done any in PNG yet. I'm currently doing one through Tonga. So we have DLA works with the Pacific Legal Network, and that's just a matter of us contacting lawyers in one of the Pacific states and seeing if they'll assist pro bono. So it's definitely not off the cards. The PNG is part of there's definitely offices in PNG, part of the Pacific Legal Network. Definitely not off the cards that we could reach out to the network and see if they'll assist. It's also definitely not something we've done in the past, and so I couldn't tie us to it, but could definitely, see. We're just like, we'll just contact the network and see who can help. And what was the second part of that question? Sorry, Kate?
Sorry. So the second
No,
part was about interpreters, and if you guys would
yeah.
cover the cost of using interpreters.
Yeah, we've used interpreters in the past, and where it's necessary, happy to look into that.
Great. So I've got two other questions. So one is, do you guys help with changing details on existing birth certificates?
Yes, that's something that we do plenty of, changing details, changing, like adding a parent is something that we do quite a bit of as well. Yeah, happy to do any amendments to certificates. New South Wales has actually just recently changed their laws so that changing your gender on your birth certificate is free. So seen an uptick in some of those referrals just to, even though it's free, just to streamline the process. So happy to do any sort of amendments to certificates. Yeah.
Great. And another question we have here is about a specific client situation. So
Mhm.
Julie has said, I have a single mum needing her birth certificate and for her 5 children. Is that a possible referral?
Definitely. Yeah, happy to do that. We've done quite a few whole families at a time.
Fantastic. So I'm just having a look. That might be all the questions we've received so far. So if you have a burning question that hasn't been answered yet, this is your time to pop it up in the Q&A box. Otherwise, it might be then about reaching out to Riley at another point to ask questions about your specific client situation. Let's give another minute in case anyone has any other questions. But thank you, Riley, so much for joining us today and for sharing so much information about the work that your team have been doing in this space. It's such a vital area and can cause such an administrative burden for people not to have this core document. So we really appreciate you joining us today and sharing so much information.